On the 31st of July of 1997, India lost one of its smartest and enduring entrepreneurs, Champak Lal Choksi. Who is Champak Lal Choksi? Well, it's the year of 1942 and the World War II was getting out of control. The British forces were battling Germany in Europe and Japan in Sri Lanka. 4 years earlier, in 1938, on one hand, J.R.D. Tata, at the age of 34, was then appointed as the youngest chairman of the Tata Group, and on the other hand, the Birlas were caught in a frenzy of setting up their own manufacturing empire. In those volatile days, colonial rule had banned the imports of many products across various industries, and it seemed cost effective, especially given that the World War was emptying their deep pockets. And one of the industries happened to be the paints industry. A temporary ban on paint imports during World War II resulted in an opportunity for domestic production. Spotting this opportunity, a 26-year-old entrepreneur, Champak Lal H. Choksi, and 3 of his friends set up Asian Paints in Mumbai. Fast forward to 1967, Asian Paints had become the largest paints company in India, a position that it holds good even now in 2020. It urges one to think about how Asian Paints became the giant it is today. You might ask why a giant? They have big competitors like Berger Paints and Nerolac Paints who are doing really well. But what is it that a Berger Paints or a Nerolac Paints is not doing that Asian Paints is doing really well? Well, if you go to the Asian Paints office in your neighborhood,
across the road, if you ask them that, say, on 27th April in Pune, in Viman Nagar at 5 pm, what will you sell? They can tell us right now with 98% accuracy.
Now that's the power of what they have built, and the credit goes to one man, Champak Lal Choksi. Choksi's strength lay in identifying consumption trends and patterns earlier than the herd and devising strategies around them to optimize it and choose the winning approach and focus consistently on improving processes. In the 1940s and 50s, decorative paints was basically a commodity business consisting mainly of dry distemper, also called chuna. Distemper is the most basic form of paint and consists mainly of coloring agents, chalk and lime. Choksi's challenge was to establish the Asian Paints brand in an industry where a handful of distributors control the supply of paints across India. After being ignored by the distributors in big cities like Mumbai and Pune, Choksi and his partners took to the villages to sell directly to the shopkeepers. Asian Paints opened its first dealership in a small town called Sangli in the south of Maharashtra. Shopkeepers in small towns felt pampered while dealing directly with the company rather than dealing with distributors. They were also getting a product at a better price. The company's abilities to understand the consumption patterns are legendary. Why? Because during the Pongal festival in Tamil Nadu and the Pola festival in Maharashtra, villagers worship their bulls. Choksi noticed that these festivals brought in a unique demand for painting the horns of bulls with bright colors in small quantities. He saw this opportunity and succeeded in breaking into this market as well. Back in the 1940s, Choksi, being a visionary, chose the decorative retail segment of paints instead of the industrial paints. He saw that the industrial paints business was price driven and the company with the lowest price won the business for that year. However, decorative retail was very different. It had the potential of building very sustainable strengths around relationships with dealers and distributors. Mr. Choksi bet his fortune on building a strong presence within this consumer-facing segment of paints. As the demand for their products rose, dealers in small towns and cities started stocking them. As a result of this, the larger distributors in bigger cities who previously did not want to sell their products started partnering with the company. This approach of building the business from the rural to the urban India and catering to the untapped consumer demand helped the company reach an annual turnover of over 23 crores only a decade after it was founded. As time passed, in 1967, 25 years after commencing operations, Asian Paints became India's largest paints company by revenue. During this phase, the company focused on establishing the right product portfolio, the right distribution channel, and a strong brand recall value. Although the firm was not very profitable initially, in the period between the 1952 and 62, its revenues grew at a compounded annual growth rate of 21%, with margins rising to 13% by 1962, and the return on capital employed was rising to 26%. In this video, we discussed how Asian Paints started and how Champak Lal Choksi optimized his operations to form one of the world's largest data conglomerates. Wait, data conglomerate? We did not discuss data, did we? Asian Paints doubles its business every 3 years, and you might think that's because of their paint business. Well, you're not wrong to think that, but Asian Paints is no less than a Google or a Facebook with massive amounts of data. Stick around till our next video where we will talk about how Asian Paints really makes their money.